T.S. Eliot is one of the most influential figures of the 20th century, and his phenomenal work, The Wasteland, is recognized as a revolutionary work of art. It is a poem of 433 lines, but is termed as by Ezra Pound as the longest poem in the English language because of its profundity, perplexity, and density of poetic allusions, myths, and meaning. It's considered as a modern epic. The poem is dedicated to Ezra Pound himself, and Eliot calls him the better craftsman. Eliot has clearly stated that he placed before Pound the manuscript of a sprawling, chaotic poem called The Wasteland in Paris in 1922, which the master reduced to about half its size in the form in which it appears in print now. So Ezra Pound, he reduced the poem to almost half its size. The poem was written in 1921, partly in Margate and partly at Lucerne, where Eliot was recovering from a physical and psychological breakdown. The Wasteland, the poem, was published in The Criterion in London in October 1922 and in the Dial in New York in November 1922. So Eliot here in this poem uses the technique of multi-dimensional elusiveness. That is, he makes use of very many allusions, references, quotations from a variety of authors, from a variety of nations, from a variety of ages. His eclecticism arises out of his acceptance of Bergson's doctrine that past moments are preserved in present memory. His eclecticism encompasses the vast and rich cultural and literary heritage of ancient Greece and Rome and of the entire continent of Europe. So this is in order to bring in an all-inclusive consciousness. The poem is written in blank verse, though there are several variations here and there, as we see that trochaic meter is used in the very first or in the very opening section, with strong accentuated rhythms in the opening lines of the poem. The poem speaks about the degeneration in spiritual values as well as moral sexual perversion, where sex has degenerated into animal copulation and is no longer a potent life-giving source of regeneration as it was the case in the past. The past and the present, they are constantly juxtaposed in the poem. The various allusions from the past and the present, they are presented in a collage form. The entire poem, we see, is seen through Tiresias. What Tiresias sees, in fact, is the substance of the poem. This is what Eliot himself says in his notes to the poem The Wasteland. He, although a mere spectator and not indeed a character, is yet the most important personage in the poem, uniting all the rest. So his mind is the arena where the wasteland or the poem or all the events that are referred to in the poem are staged. The first section of the poem The Wasteland is The Burial of the Dead. It is full title of The Burial Service in the Church of England. That is the order for the burial of the dead. Eliot here feels that the modern wastelanders, they are almost dead. So he has come to bury the entire humanity. April is the cruelest month, breeding lilacs out of the dead land, mixing memory and desire, stirring dull roots with spring rain. Winter kept us warm, covering earth in forgetful snow, feeding a little life with dried tubers. So April signifies rebirth. April is the month of regeneration, rebirth, blossoming. But so it should be a welcome month for the wastelanders who are almost dead, that there would be some kind of a regeneration brought about in their lives. But actually, April is not a welcome month for them. It is painful for them because it implies some kind of an effort on their part to bring about rebirth or regeneration. So they don't approve of it and they want to stick to winter, which is symbolic of spiritual death. So in April, in the fertility rituals also, it is the month is connected with the new harvest and the strength and potency of the fisher king, which gave or which restored back fertility to his lands. Also in the Christian calendar, April, the month of April is associated with Easter, which reminds us of the crucifixion of Christ and his resurrection. But this month, which reminds us of resurrection of Christ, which reminds us of the new harvest of rebirth, is a month which is not at all welcomed by the modern wastelanders. Tiresias observes that the wastelanders have lost their communion with nature. The spring has arrived, but they do not feel the sprightliness, the energy within them of nature in the new season. Lilacs have blossomed. There are fresh flowers in nature. With the touch of the first showers of spring, the deadened roots of the winter have been stirred into new life. Geoffrey Chaucer could imagine that with the advent of spring, men and women were inspired with faith in the spiritual meaning of life, and they set out for their journey to Canterbury. So April is the cruelest month also reminds us of Chaucer's opening lines or in the prologue to the Canterbury Tales, April with sweet shower. That is, the April brings about spring or the sweet showers, which remind us of rebirth, regeneration, and the people, they are full of enthusiasm, they are inspired with faith, and they move on to a pilgrimage to Canterbury, which is the shrine of Thomas a Becket. They heard the inviting note of the bird and the inspiring voice of the saint who urged them to go on pilgrimage. But in contrast to them, for the modern wastelanders, for the inhabitants of the wasteland, the sweetness of spring has no meaning because of their spiritual barrenness. They are spiritually barren and they do not want to bring about any regeneration because that would need an effort on their own part, and they don't want to make any effort. April is the cruelest month to them, for in the words of W.P. Kenny, in this dead land any reminder of life is cruel, just as the awareness of a joy we cannot share and provoke pain. They yearn to seek belongingness and communion with others by breaking the borderlines of their isolation, but the memories of the experienced realities of life kill their desires. Yet both memory and desire, they work concurrently, they work together. They remember in winter, they warm themselves with indulgence in sensual enjoyment, and they want to stick to it. They don't want to give up the enjoyment, or they want to cling to those sweet memories of sensual enjoyment. So we see the modern wastelanders during their winter hibernation period are engrossed in sensual pleasures, and they still want to cling to that very state of life. Here we find a reference to a German countess who in her autobiography My Past, written in 1913, gives a reference to her childhood stage when she had spent some time with her cousin when she was staying at the Archduke's. And she says, summer surprised us coming over the Starnberger Sea, which is a lake near Munich in Germany. With a shower of rain, we stopped in the colonnade. Colonnade is a row of trees, and went on in sunlight into the Hofgarten. Hofgarten is a public park in Munich, and drank coffee and talked for an hour. And this line is in German, meaning I am not Russian at all. I come from Lithuania. I am a pure, real German. So this symbolizes contemporary rootlessness, because nowadays in the modern wasteland, or in the modern times, we, for our own personal gains, keep moving from one place to another, keep shifting places without being associated with our own country. That is, in the past, people used to sacrifice their lives for patriotic feelings for their country, but now life is totally egocentric, and people keep on changing places for their material personal gains. And when we were children, staying at the Archduke's, my cousin's, he took me out on a sled, and I was frightened. He said, Mary, Mary, hold on tight. And down we went. In the mountains, there you feel free. I read much of the night and go south in the winter. So, Chaucer's pilgrimage is parodied here by Mary, who runs from life and wanders here and there in search of the possibilities of making the best of life. In summer, she had been in Munich at the northern end of the Starnberger Sea with a man. She recapitulates that she has been a rootless, lonely creature since her childhood. Her childhood memory of sledging with her cousin in the mountains is still a treasure for her, for she had then experienced an exhilarating feeling of freedom which is now denied to her. Now her own vocation is to read in the night and go south in the winter, because there you feel free in the south. T.S. Pierce rightly remarks that hers is a life of some potential wasted, not so much by any action or intention of hers, but simply wasted by inaction, a failure to grasp experience. And when she is surprised by summer, and when a shower of rain comes, she tries to seek shelter from it, because she is unaware of its purifying and fertilizing significance, because rain here is a symbol of regeneration, fertility. But for the modern wastelander that Mary is, she doesn't like, or she doesn't approve of regeneration. She doesn't want to go for fertility or regeneration, rejuvenation. She wants to cling to a life of inaction. This section is taken from Ezekiel and Ecclesiastes from the Old Testament. The landscape of the world described here gives the mental and emotional topographic state of man in the modern wasteland. What are the roots that clutch? What branches grow out of this stony rubbish? Stone is a symbol of sterility. Son of man, you cannot say or guess, for you know only a heap of broken images. Heap of broken images signifies spiritual values destroyed by the mechanization of society, where the sun beats and the dead tree gives no shelter, the cricket no relief, and the dry stone no sound of water. Regeneration. Only there is shadow under this red rock. Come in under the shadow of this red rock. Red rock that stands for elemental values. And I will show you something different from either your shadow at morning striding behind you, or your shadow at evening rising to meet you. I will show you fear in a handful of dust. So Tarsius here identifies in his mind all of us with Mary, and asks us whether we are rooted, because like Mary we are also rootless. And he asks us the rhetorical question whether we are rooted in a cultural tradition which may grow in our wastelandish civilization? What are the roots that clutch? What branches grow out of this stony rubbish? This is the question put to us. His addressing us collectively as Son of Man, as called, or it calls to our mind God commanding Ezekiel to go to Israel to tell the unbelieving people that the Messiah will come to them very soon. But we non-believers cannot conceive of existence of cultural values like unbelieving Israelites who were worshipping idols. We are worshipping false gods of sensual pleasures, and because our senses remain unsatisfied, what we live by are mere broken images of our failure and frustration and memories of our ignoble life. God will not send an Ezekiel to communicate his judgment to us as he did in the case of Israelites. Our altars are already desolate, broken. The images of our mean and sordid greed and lust are already broken. We are already slain before our idols by our own cravings. In our wasteland, the dry tree of our decadent culture cannot save us from doom. The occasional religious performances, like the chirping of crickets that heralds the rain, will not ensure our salvation, because we are not committed to a belief till we are scattered like dry and lifeless small pebbles. We cannot hope to get the showers of life from without. Of course, we have still a chance to save ourselves from total spiritual collapse. We may seek our redemption from the artifacts of these values by engendering in ourselves a belief in the elemental values, the red rock, that is the church. No material possession can save us from death and the consignment of our bodies to dust from which it had sprung. Any thought about life except this is vanity. This idea of threatening death frightens us all because we are in love with life and its transitory pleasures. Tarsius, in these lines, observes two shots of love scenes in contrast to each other, one from ancient times and the other from the present wasteland. The first four lines and the last line, they are from Richard Wagner's opera Tristan and Isolde. Tristan is lying in a wounded state and he is waiting for Isolde to come. And the first four lines, they mean fresh wind blows from the homeland, my Irish child, where are you lingering? And the last line, when translated, is empty and desolate the sea. That is, there is no sign as yet of the ship bearing Isolde approach. So Tristan, he is fatally wounded and he is lying on the bank of flowers, longing for death and waiting for his beloved Isolde. But he was informed that the ship coming did not have her on board. Dejected, he dies. Isolde, seeing Tristan's dead body, also dies. Such a passionate emotional bonding is not possible in the case of the modern wastelanders. Rather, they cling to life even though there is nothing to cherish in lives, as a noble dream or an ideal vision, and naturally they must fear death. So these modern wastelanders, they are afraid of death, though their life itself is as good as dead. The second shot exposes this, such a hollowness of man-woman relationship without emotional warmth, and this is the story of the Hyacinth girl, a young girl who has had an experience of being in love with a man. She tells him that when they returned from the Hyacinth garden a year before, her heart, instead of cherishing the sweetness of the moments spent with him, was filled with the terror of her existence. And she says, yet when we came back, late from the hyacinth garden, your arms full and your hair wet. I could not speak, and my eyes failed. I was neither living nor dead, and I knew nothing, looking into the heart of light, the silence. The words of the sailor who told Tristan that in the empty sea there was no sign of ship carrying Isolde have become the fate of the hyacinth girl. That is, the desolate, empty, wide sea is the vast void that is her life. So after the hyacinth girl, who is in a maimed state, we come across another wastelander, Madame Sosostris. She has been taken from Huxley's novel Chrome Yellow. She is a famous fortune teller, and she decides, or she tells the fate of various characters which appear in the subsequent sections of the poem The Wasteland. So, Madame Sosostris, famous clairvoyant, had a bad cold, nevertheless is known to be the wisest woman in Europe, with a wicked pack of cards. Here, said she, is your card. The drowned Phoenician sailor, those are pearls that were his eyes. Look, here is Belladonna, the lady of the rocks, the lady of situations. Here is the man with 3 staves, and here the wheel, and here is the one-eyed merchant, and this card, which is blank, is something he carries on his back, which I am forbidden to see. I do not find the hanged man, fear death by water. I see crowds of people walking round in a ring. Thank you. If you see dear Mrs. Equitone, tell her I bring the horoscope myself. One must be so careful these days, because fortune telling was an illegal activity, and so there was constant fear of the police, and one needed to be careful. In the wasteland of Mary and the hyacinth girl, the old myths and rituals performed for the welfare of the community at large are debased and corrupted. The tarot pack of cards, which was once used by the Egyptians to predict the rise and fall of the waters of the Nile, which made the land fertile, are now used by Madame Sosostris, the famous clairvoyant, for foretelling the future of the self-seeking wastelanders. She, the wisest woman in Europe, in the ironical sense of the term, cannot recognize the hanged man, the symbol of spiritual regeneration, as the resurrected Christ was not recognized by the travelers journeying to Emmaus. Unreal city. Daily routine and materialism make it unreal. So life here is led only on physical planes. Eliot's London, Dante's Limbo, or Baudelaire's Paris, it could be any city for that matter. Unreal city. Under the brown fog of a winter dawn, a crowd flowed over London Bridge, so many. I had not thought death had undone so many. Sighs, short and infrequent, were exhaled, and each man fixed his eyes before his feet. Flowed up the hill and down King William Street, a street in London, to where St. Mary Woolnoth, the church clock tower, kept the hours with a dead sound on the fatal stroke of 9. When Christ was crucified, there I saw one I knew, and stopped him, crying, Stetson, you who were with me in the ships at Meli. Meli was a great naval battle fought between Rome and Carthage in 260 BC in the Punic Wars. So all wars are one war for Eliot. That copse you planted last year in your garden, has it begun to sprout? Will it bloom this year, or has the sudden frost disturbed its bed? Oh, keep the dog far hence, that's friend to men. Or With his nails he'll dig it up again. You hypocrite lecture, mon semblance, mon frère. Tiresias here takes us to a scene of urban squalor, to the unreal city of London, which is cut off from both natural and spiritual sources of life, and no longer has anything of its old sense of community. As Elizabeth Drew says, its citizens have a nightmarish existence, moving like automatons, regulating their life with the strokes of clock. They have no community feeling. Even while going on their duty at 9 in the morning, they flow in crowd over the London Bridge and look like a conglomeration of isolated individuals. A lonely crowd, as they are called by many critics. So there are so many moving on the streets over London Bridge, but they are isolated individuals. They do not recognize each other. They do not communicate with each other. Tiresias feels shocked to see the spiritless creatures as Dante felt in Inferno when he saw a big crowd of poor spirits who, while alive in the mortal world, never knew either good or evil or cared for anything except themselves. So self-seeking people. Tiresias stops one of the automatons called Stetson and reminding him that the latter buried his decaying lustful self with the hope that a new purer self would spring out from it, asks him whether he has observed signs of regeneration or not. Tiresias doubts Stetson's spiritual regeneration because he fears that the sudden frost of disbelief and indifference towards the spiritual meaning of life would have destroyed the sprouting seeds of belief. Further, he warns Stetson to keep the dog of lust away from his spiritual soil lest he should spoil it. Finally, Eliot jumps before the reader with his blasting comment on him. You hypocrite lecture, mon semblance, mon frère. He universalizes the symbol of Stetson by identifying him with himself as well as with the reader, who probably might be thinking himself to be different from Stetson. So he calls the reader his fellowman and his brother and rebukes him for his hypocrisy, that is, all wastelanders, including the poet himself, are the same hypocrites. Thank you so much.